The Wicked Anvil has stood for over 10 years. Legendary battles and heroes have graced these halls. This is going to be episodes 1 through 4 of my series. If you'd like to watch them in episode form, you can go back on my channel or hit the subscribe button and see all the future ones. If you enjoy this, hit a like, comment, subscribe, all the fun stuff. Let's go ahead and hop into the story. Upon hearing the news of the Hall of Shore civilization falling to the Goblins in the north, the southern faction worked to avenge their kin, and a forward war-centric fortress was to be built, the Wicked Anvil. Named just for its purpose, it is to be a fortress that the Goblin Hammer will ring against repeatedly and it will not falter. Nestled between a mighty dwarven kingdom and the treacherous goblin-held lands of the Maligning Monster, this fortress will serve as the front line in our relentless war against the Goblin Horde. With the echoes of hammer and anvil ringing in the deeps, our dwarves will forge this bastion into an unbreakable shield and a mighty weapon for the dwarves, protecting our kin and striking fear into the hearts of our enemies. Join us as we embark on this epic journey where every stone laid brings us closer to victory in the battle for survival. This is the Wicked Anvil. Like every fortress playthrough, we set out to strike the earth. These 7 dwarves were sent out by the mountain homes to build a fortress ready for war. As you can see here, our dwarves sat in between a massive goblin faction and our dwarf faction, multiple thousand strong. Quickly we set our miners to digging out some tunnels below the ground. These would be main entrances and our trading post. Soon after, our first stockpile was laid upon the ground. This way we could get some of our supplies out of the freezing weather on top. We embarked in midwinter of the year 119, so the weather wasn't as good as other seasons. While digging down, we had to deal with a light aquifer, which wasn't too bad. We just walled it off with some wood from the surface and smoothed out any stone that we found. Digging down, it wasn't too long before we found a massive underground expanse, a cavern with a lot of flat area for us to build in. Personally, I have never built inside a cavern, but I decided this would be my first time. The Wicked Anvil needed a lot of space to grow, and here's where it will be built. As the dwarves progressed through bringing more stuff down to the stockpiles and digging a little bit deeper to prepare our entrance to the caverns, spring arrived, melting the ice and revealing a large lake to our northeast. Plants started to sprout and fruit on the trees began to grow. Finding a suitable section of cavern floor, we walled off this area to start putting plots for our farms in, to grow dimple cups, plump helmets, cave wheat, and pigtails. Into the late summer of the year 120, the fortress was coming along nicely with a handful of stockpiles, workshops, a dormitory, a new aquifer being built so our wells can sit on top of it, and an indoor pasture for our animals. The fortress was bustling, even attracting a few migrants in this time. Yet the cavern had some other plans for us. A helmet snake snuck into our fortress and bit a dwarf, injecting deadly venom into one of our weaponsmiths, dropping our population from 13 to 12. The mountain homes arrived in our first autumn. We managed to get a few trades out. We didn't have much to trade with them, but a few picks and some plump helmet spawns were at the top of our list. We gave them a few gems in return. Kobuk, the weaponsmith that was killed by the helmet snake early on, was buried just a few levels below the main floors. Just above on the main floor, we started building the bedroom, office, and dining hall for Votok, our leader. Some other progress was being made within the fort, mining out some more rooms, some places for workshops and stockpiles, and hauling more stuff down below to the main floor. Also, a garbage disposal was made. Soon, the Smith Lord, Votok, had checked himself into the hospital. The other dwarves hadn't noticed, but his foot had grown rotten from a bite from the helmet snake. Dumas, Abel Lotmos, her doctor, was able to cut away the rotten flesh and start the healing process for the foot. Just above the hospital where the Smith Lord was being tended to, we started carving out some new bedrooms. Our population was growing and we didn't want to fall behind on this. Just when we thought we were making good progress, amphibious humanoids, Cavedwellers, lurched from the water below. A group of them attacking our dwarves, managing to kill 2 of them, before the rest of the civilians grabbed the makeshift weapons, battle axes, and pickaxes, and charged these new foes. The little creatures actually had some gear themselves, some spears, and chainmail armor. And after our civilians dispatched of all of them, we were able to pick some of these items up and use them for our own. These little creatures and the helmet snake were first of many foes for the Wicked Anvil. Soon after the battle with the Cavedwellers, a new baby was born to Licket and Awshot, 2 of our dwarves. This baby was named Etor, the first spark. Horrified screams came from one of our stockpiles as civilians found a giant rat drinking our wine and ale. Seeing this as an opportunity, I sent our military dwarves after it. They had yet to have a good battle and had not trained yet. With shields and weapons, they charged this beast, making pretty quick work of it. Several of the dwarves felt pride in defeating a foe. While the military dwarves were busy killing giant rats, our builders finished the walls within the cavern, claiming a huge expanse of this cavern for us, the dwarves of the Wicked Anvil. Walls that reached up to the ceilings of this cave were to keep any monstrosities out, forgotten beasts, demons, giant rats, and other cave dwellers that may want to enter the fortress, providing our dwarves a safe space to live and work. Lickit, the parent to the first spark child, created our first artifact, a limonite ushdish, an organ-like instrument that billows air through 354 bone pipes. The tones are controlled with bone keys on a keyboard. This limonite artifact was the centerpiece to our new temple complex. About 100 levels below, we found the magma sea. Upon this, we went ahead and started placing magma forges, magma smelters, and kilns for clay and glass. This room would be the start of all the production for the Wicked Anvil. This is where our weapons and armor will be forged by some of our best smiths. In an effort to secure some giant spider silk to turn into cloth for the construction of an artifact, we opened a hallway to a new cavern, where 7 Crundles ran through the hallway and tried to get into our fortress. The dwarves of the Wicked Anvil had never seen these little creatures before. They did not know how dangerous they were. Yet all the same, our dwarves rushed down bravely, cutting down Crundle after Crundle until none of them were left. Our dwarves were able to then go into the cavern, collect the giant spider silk, and then we walled it off with a door. A trader dwarf had arrived in one of our migrant waves. We assigned him to a broker position, and when we finally did need him, we found him meditating on wealth. I'm going to take this as a good sign of things to come. As our population continued to grow into larger numbers, our dwarves set out mining even more bedrooms. With a population of now 85, we needed plenty more. I don't exactly know why this happened, but the child, the first spark, threw a tantrum and ended up getting stomped out by other civilians on one of our staircases and dying. I have no idea why this happened. She was a very angry child, but there was nothing I could have done to help it. On the topic of dwarves dying, we built a new fishery. With an underground tunnel leading from the fortress over here, our dwarves can fish in peace. Now we did end up losing 7 dwarves in one of the collapses of the floors, leading us to now dig a ditch that led to the mainland instead of building out over the water. Just underground, the Temple of the Coven of Gates was founded, a temple complex led by Kevish, the Holy Defense. A few artifacts were thrown into the back room, granting the value to this temple complex. And above, under the surface, we traded with the mountain homes. Gathering some plump helmets and other food, we traded away some finished goods of bone. And that's when a couple snatchers arrived, 2 of them. Just after the mountain home caravan left, one of them actually got away with a child. The other one also got away, our military taking too long to respond. That's when they heard the blood-curdling howl that echoed through the night, signaling the arrival of an unexpected terror, a ferocious weremole. The beast with monstrous claws charged the gates of the Wicked Anvil. The loyal and fierce guard dogs sprang into action, forming a line of defense against the abomination. The battle was brutal. Dogs lunged at the weremole, snapping and biting, determined to protect their dwarven masters below. But the beast was powerful, cutting down the brave hounds one by one. 7 of them fell. Just as the weremole breached the gates, it suddenly convulsed, its form shrinking and twisting, until before the eyes of the dwarves, it transformed back into its original shape, a dwarf. In the confusion, the now dwarven creature fled into the darkness. The dwarves of the Wicked Anvil had been introduced to a new horror. While most of the fortress was dealing with the weremole attack and hauling the corpses of our dead dogs down to the Atom Smasher, we didn't realize that there was an artifact creation going on. Tobel, one of our dwarves, went berserk after not being able to craft his artifact after a time. He was waiting on some silk thread, which never came. Thankfully, he didn't harm anybody else, and the military dwarves put him down quickly. With the moods of the fortress starting to dwindle, we decided to start building our tavern. This will be one of the greatest taverns in the southern region, decorated with some of the best handiwork on copper tables and copper thrones, and also magnificent statues made of silver of dwarves and their accomplishments. This tavern should boost the moods of our dwarves significantly and give them some free time to socialize. The Anvil Commander Ezum gathered the Hammerbane squad. Clad in decorated iron armor, their hammers and axes at the ready, their squad prepared for a bold assault on the nearby goblin settlement of Spidery Bowels. Ezum knew that this strike would send a clear message to the Maligning Monster faction. The dwarves of the Wicked Anvil were no longer on the defensive. The Wicked Anvil, now fortified and ready, would not just withstand a goblin counterattack, it would crush it. The clash at Spidery Bowels would mark the beginning of a larger conflict, but Ezum and his warriors were determined to bring the fight to the goblins. A fortress that has not just endured but thrived in the recent years of relentless war. A few years have passed since its founding, and the dwarves within these stone halls have transformed it into a formidable stronghold. The Wicked Anvil is no longer just a forward base for the mountain home, it is a symbol of defiance against the goblins of the Maligning Monster. In these years of blood and battle, the fortress has fully committed to the war effort, launching raids and fending off attacks from goblin hordes. Within the caverns, our blacksmiths work tirelessly, forging new iron and steel armor and weapons. But yet the goblins weren't the only threat. From the depths of the caverns below, strange cave-dwellers have emerged as an unsuspected foe. Yet through all the chaos, the Wicked Anvil has stood strong, its dwarves now more united and battle-hardened than ever. Join us as we dive into the story of how this fortress has become a beacon of hope and strength for our mountain home. The war rages on, but the Wicked Anvil is ready for whatever comes next. Early summer of the year 124, our guild of planters came and requested a guild hall, so that they may teach some of the younger dwarves, and also dwarves who don't have a planter skill, their craft. The manager decided this would be a great idea, and he installed an artifact tower cap chair that was built by one of the dwarves here in the Wicked Anvil. This gave the room the value to become a guild hall. With our population absolutely exploding, new guilds, new temples were being constructed, but also we needed to construct new bedrooms. So, 31 new bedrooms were built just above our main floors. While bedroom construction was going on down in the caverns, the mountain homes arrived with their autumn trade caravan. We traded them for lots of food, lots of surface plants, and also a few barrels of fish. They also brought a piece of literature, the students' minerals, which we happily took for future scribes to read and copy. We traded them a lot of finished goods and they profited over 10,000 in value. Just a few levels below where the trading was going on, a new barracks was being established, this time for the new militia squad, the Thundering Spears. This is where they will train for the upcoming war against the goblins of the Maligning Monster. Now, to start producing armor and weapons for the war, we needed more iron, which we found in our main floors of our cavern. It was riddled with hematite and magnetite, which is ores for iron. Now, this personally got me very excited. A dwarf named Enith, Lorbam Sterus, was possessed. She took over a magma forge, meaning we could possibly get an artifact, weapon, or armor. Now, I was really hoping that she would pick up some lead. That way we could create a lead warhammer for our Anvil Commander Ezum. If she would use a heavy metal with that kind of density for a warhammer, Ezum would be unstoppable. While this was going on, a forgotten beast, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce that name at the bottom there, was fighting an ambush of Cavedwellers. These pesky little creatures had bothered us once before, and it was good to see the forgotten beast tear through them. Remember what I said about lead? Well, that's it. Enith actually picked up some lead. Now we can just kind of hope for... yeah, that's right, she didn't make a god tier weapon, she made a thin lead gauntlet. So it'll be used as an artifact to build value in one of our guild halls or temples. Back at the main entrance of the fort, I had realized we had started collecting some seeds. We hadn't really gone to the surface much to collect plants, but somehow we ended up with a ton of seeds from stuff we had cooked. So we walled off a section and put a roof on this little building. We are now going to be able to grow some surface plants for the fortress. Speaking of surface plants, I realized we didn't have a lot of fruit to brew alcohol with, so we went ahead and walled off a handful of trees with a staircase leading down to the main entrance. Now, I didn't put a ceiling on this one because I don't care if things climb in. Our drawbridge is set basically downstream of this, so we can still block off any foes if they decide to climb over this. Now, some of these surface plants did need to be milled, so we built a handful of millstones and some windmills on the surface to power them. I'm sure our dwarves will love this over the manual work of turning the millstones themselves. Our Anvil Commander Ezum decided it was time for a dungeon. With a growing population and plenty of alcohol to go around, it was only a matter of time before crimes were committed. They picked a corner along the wall in the cavern and started construction on a new dungeon. Unbeknownst to the dwarves, in their haste they had left small, unnoticed holes in the walls, gateways to the unknown danger in the cavern beyond. These openings, though seemingly insignificant, became the entry point for a group of 20 cave-dwellers. The cave-dwellers, with their grotesque forms and savage instincts, were drawn to the scent of the dwarves, sensing an opportunity to strike with this newfound entry. Amid the construction, the cave-dwellers launched their attack, pouring through the holes in a frenzy. With gnashing teeth and clawed hands, the dwarves were caught off guard. They had little time to react as the cave-dwellers descended with ferocity. Chaos erupted as the dwarves struggled to defend themselves, their tools turning from construction implements to weapons of survival. Among the defenders was Domas, known as the Healing Lord in this fortress, one of the original 7 dwarves who had settled the Wicked Anvil. Domas was revered for his wisdom and his ability to mend wounds, both physical and spiritual. He had seen the fortress grow from its humble beginnings, and his presence was a source of comfort and strength for the others. Domas struck blow after blow in a desperate struggle, yet the cave-dweller's sheer brutality overcame him. With a final, savage swipe, the creature's claws found their mark, and Domas fell, mortally wounded and bleeding out. The surviving dwarves, though victorious in driving off the cave-dwellers, were left to mourn their losses. The death of Domas, the Healing Lord, was a heavy blow to the Wicked Anvil. He had been more than just a warrior or a healer. He had been a pillar of the community, a living link to the fortress's origins from the mountain home. And just like all other things, he had come to an end. He would be buried in the tombs below, and the dwarves would miss him dearly. Or we could even start the cleanup after the cave-dweller ambush. An Etten named Agesh arrived, a giant humanoid, finding her way into our fortress, but little did she know it was the trap hallway. She found herself pierced and cut by our traps below, stonefall traps rolling boulders off of her shoulder and her neck. It did not take long before the Etten had fallen. This allowed us to now focus on burying the victims of the cave-dwellers. The following season, after the Etten and the cave-dweller incidents, the mountain homes arrived with their trading caravan, which they brought lots of instruments upon hearing of our temples and guild halls that could possibly use them. We sent them home with a profit of 7,000, but before they left, we promoted our mayor, Udil, to the Baroness of the Wicked Anvil. This is a huge sign for the Wicked Anvil, showing the mountain homes' support of our fortress and our cause. Now, this was very exciting for the fortress. In one of the migrant waves, a High Master weaponsmith named Aban showed up. Now, Aban was granted the title Warforger. The mountain homes must have known we were in need of a weaponsmith, so they sent Aban, the Warforger, to the fortress to help the war efforts. The Hammerbane militia squad and the Anvil Commander Ezum were sent out to raid the goblin pits of Open Doom. With a population of roughly 100, our scouts say, our militia was told to stay low, search for any surviving dwarves or loot that you could find. Ezum the Anvil Commander is a legendary fighter and leader, sent from the mountain homes directly to lead the war efforts here at the Wicked Anvil. He alone killed 3 goblins at Open Doom. They were then immediately sent back, this time stealing some iron armor and an instrument. The raids were a success, but we knew this didn't make a dent into the plans of the war efforts of the mountain home. More would need to be done. Now, what needed to be done was to take out more goblins, and the dwarves of the Wicked Anvil would get their chance. The goblins of the Maligning Monster, enraged by the recent dwarven raid on Spidery Bowels and Open Doom, gathered their forces for a ruthless counterattack on the Wicked Anvil, hauling creatures of war with them, 2 large trolls. The goblins poured into the trap hallway, triggering the deadly mechanisms that lined the walls and the floor. Serrated blades started spinning, stonefall traps rained down boulders, cutting down scores of goblins as they charged forward. The hallway became a slaughterhouse, but the goblins pressed on. While the goblins fought through the deadly gauntlet, 2 trolls, massive and unyielding, smashed their way into the newly constructed surface garden. The dwarves did not know that the trolls were able to destroy hatch covers. The trolls descended, rampaging through the area, their enormous hands tearing up the earth and crushing anything beneath its path. Several dwarven civilians caught off guard as they tended the surface crops were brutally killed, their bodies left broken among the trampled plants. The Thunderspear squad received word of the trolls up top. Hearing of the chaos above, they rushed up the stairs from the lower levels, their weapons at the ready. As they emerged from the garden, they were met with the terrifying sight of the trolls in the midst of their destructive frenzy. Without hesitation, the Thunderspears charged. Meanwhile, in the trap hallway, the Hammerbane squad, led by the seasoned Anvil Commander Ezum, awaited the goblins who made it through the deadly traps. The Hammerbanes, hardened warriors with a fierce reputation, met the goblins head-on as they emerged from the hallway battered and bloodied. The clash was swift and brutal. The Hammerbanes cut down the goblins with practiced precision. The goblins, already weakened by the trap, stood little chance against the seasoned dwarven veterans. Within minutes, the hallway was littered with the goblin corpses, a stench of blood and death heavy in the air. When the last goblin fell, the Hammerbane squad emerged from the hallway to find the Thunderspears standing over the bodies of the slain trolls. Their victory, hard-fought, but costly. The loss of 6 of the 10 Thunderspears was a heavy blow to the fortress. The death toll among the civilians weighed heavily on the survivors. The surface garden, once a symbol of hope and new beginnings, was now a battleground, its soil stained with blood. Though the goblins had been defeated, the cost of victory was steep. The dwarves of the Wicked Anvil knew that the threat from the Maligning Monster was far from over, and the fortress's defenses would need to be rebuilt and strengthened. The survivors, though bloodied and battered, resolved to continue the fight, honoring the fallen by ensuring that their sacrifice would not be in vain. The dwarven fortress of the Wicked Anvil has stood one more year. This fortress will continue to be the spearhead for the war efforts of the mountain home. The goblins of the Maligning Monster must fall. Years of war have forged this fortress into an unshakable bastion. The once small outpost has grown into a key stronghold in the battle against the goblins of the Maligning Monster. The war efforts are going well, with each raid and battle bringing the dwarves closer to what seems like a victory in this century-long war. Now, the Wicked Anvil stands as a lifeline for the mountain homes. They need the Wicked Anvil to act as a spearhead in the war against the goblins. Together, we'll ensure that it remains strong and unyielding in the face of any threat. Join the Land Ash Dwarves as we dive into the latest chapter of this epic saga. The Hydra, Atog Okuk, marked one of the most terrifying moments in the Wicked Anvil's history. As the beast ascended upon the fortress, its 7 serpent-like heads moved with terrifying speed and coordination, striking fear into the hearts of the dwarves. The chaos began when the Hydra slipped into an unnoticed vulnerability. A staircase left exposed by the reconstruction of the fishery on the surface. After last winter's goblin siege, the dwarves had been so focused on repairing their war-torn fortress that they had overlooked this small yet fatal gap in their defenses. As Atog Okuk rushed down the staircase, the first dwarf to cross this path was struck down in a heartbeat, his life claimed by the Hydra's relentless jaws. The dwarf was split between the heads of the Hydra. In a quick motion, the dwarf was thrown about the fortress in pieces. In the midst of all this chaos, Nil, a seasoned warrior of the fortress and a member of the Thunderspears, stepped forward. Knowing that retreat was not an option, he charged headlong into the battle. With a mighty swing of his spear, Nil severed one of the Hydra's heads. But the beast was far from finished. In a brutal and drawn-out struggle, Nil managed to decapitate a second head. Despite the Hydra's relentless assault, Nil's resolve did not falter. With one final and precise strike, he pierced the skull of the 5th head, and the creature let out a spine-chilling roar. Its remaining heads flailed in agony before the beast collapsed, lifeless, onto the stone floor of the fortress. The dwarves gathered round the fallen Hydra, awestruck by Nil's bravery. The dwarves chanted, "Hydra Slayer," cheering on Nil's accomplishment. The death of Atog Okuk brought relief, but it was a sobering reminder that even in the times of rebuilding, the Wicked Anvil could never let its guard down. This victory, though costly in the life of one dwarf, further solidified the dwarves' resolve, and proved that no matter what horrors they faced, from goblin sieges to legendary beasts, they would stand strong. The dwarves had decided that Nil earned the title of Hydra Slayer. Just 11 days later, Dastot, the competent weaponsmith, had a mood, and he claimed a forge. He ended up creating a beautiful iron spear. The experience turned him from a competent weaponsmith to a legendary weaponsmith, and he was granted full control over one of our magma forges down below. With the recent bravery of Nil, one of our spear dwarfs, he was granted a larger room and some better quality items. He was also gifted a masterfully crafted gold statue of the Hydra. The dwarf metalsmiths had referenced the carcass of the beast to capture all of its finest details. The statue is placed in the middle of his new room. 2 goblins thought that they could enter our fortress and steal one of our dwarven children. They rushed down our staircase where they were quickly met by Sodom, one of the Thunder Spears, a spear dwarf. When they entered the hallway, Sodom's cold iron entered them, ending the goblins without a fight. With battles becoming more and more prevalent, we decided to upgrade our hospital, giving our healing lord a better place to work. Our construction dwarves also decided to build a new library called the Inky Home. Rith and Reneg will be our scholar and our scribe for the fortress. Our metalsmiths crafted copper furniture for the library. They said the color went well against the black stone. The fortress smelters had been hard at work down below. Our first few bars of steel were poured, the ingots brought to Dastot, the dwarf who had recently made that iron spear and is now a legendary weaponsmith. Dastot managed to create not only 1, but 2 exceptional steel axes and 1 masterfully crafted axe. The masterfully crafted axe was gifted to no other than the Anvil Commander Ezum. Ezum will use this weapon to wage war against the goblins of the Maligning Monster. Early autumn of the year 126, the mountain home of Kikros sent their trade caravan. We traded them bins full of bone jewelry, which we received in return a lot of food. Some food that we didn't have so we could collect some seeds, and some more fruit, that way we could have a variety of alcohol for the dwarves of the Wicked Anvil. We sent them home with a profit of over 7,000 in value. A miller dwarf named Aerith was brawling within our tavern. Under the influence, this dwarf had toppled a silver statue that led into the tavern. There were witnesses, but the fortress guard decided that there was no punishment for this crime, seeing as Aerith had only done this one time. Anvil Commander Ezum, with his new steel battle axe that he is named Ralzo-kun, were sent off with the Hammerbanes to raid Spider Bowels. Spider Bowels has been the victim of a lot of our raids. The dwarves of the Wicked Anvil have been trying to weaken this settlement, hopefully to destroy it soon. Ezum and the Hammerbanes stole an iron anvil. The dwarves, knowing that you need an anvil to make an anvil, hoped to cripple the goblin metalsmiths and weaponsmiths for a time. Not long after the Hammerbanes had left for the raid on Spidery Bells, a weaponsmith named Ingish had a mood. She worked tirelessly down below in one of our forges and ended up creating an enormous copper corkscrew, which we used to create value in one of our guild halls. Once again, the miller named Aerith brawled in our tavern under the influence. Again, no one was hurt. This time she didn't topple a statue, but she wandered around aimlessly in the tavern, throwing threats at her nearby dwarves, and still the fortress guard found no punishment for Aerith. The Thunder Spears, led by Anul, our new commander, who now carried an exceptional steel axe crafted by Dastot. The group was sent off to Sinful Tunnel, a nearby goblin settlement just west of Spidery Bowels, where the Hammerbanes had just returned from. Sinful Tunnel held a population of about 100, our scouts say. The Thunder Spears returned with some iron armor and another iron anvil. Clearly our military has made an emphasis on stopping the goblins' production of metal goods. Our Baroness Udil has a love for anvils, so while we constructed her new room, office, and dining hall, which will hopefully keep her much happier in the days to come, one of our smiths crafted a masterful iron anvil. Knowing that Udil loved anvils, it was obvious to put one in display in her room. It is also a reminder of the purpose of the Wicked Anvil for her, and hopefully she continues to lead the Wicked Anvil and its dwarves of the Landash to victory against the goblins of the Maligning Monster. Another weaponsmith had a mood. Salab took over a forge. Now what was the most exciting for the fellow dwarves of the Wicked Anvil was that he had steel, meaning whatever he was fixing to craft was going to be made of steel. Salab ended up creating Thakdakis, a steel sword, which we added to the Baroness' office, raising the value and also reminding her of the purpose of the Wicked Anvil, to be on the offensive against the goblins. Now looking around the fortress, we noticed that there was a single dwarf who had a terrible mood. I sent the dwarves to check on him, and we actually found out that he had lost his ability to stand. Adil, a dwarf of the Thunderspear squad, had suffered severe nerve damage in a fight against the trolls last winter when they had attacked the fortress. The trolls had broken in and the Thunderspears lost 6 of their 10 members in the fight. Adil was one of the survivors, but clearly he did not get away unscathed. We let Adil retire and gave him no other jobs within the fortress, so he could go about socializing and improving his mood. It was a well-earned retirement. The dwarves of the Wicked Anvil were missing something. They were missing guard animals. There were no giant bears, cave dragons, or war elephants to guard our front gates. There were a handful of dogs, but we needed something bigger, something meaner, something more terrifying. So Ezum, the Anvil Commander, and the Hammerbanes set off to Terror Balanced, another nearby goblin settlement, to hopefully retrieve some guard animals. And just after they returned, the dwarves of the Wicked Anvil realized that the Hammerbane squad had been followed. They were followed by a goblin horde, which descended upon the Wicked Anvil with an army more fearsome than any of the dwarves had faced in recent memory. This time, the goblins had brought heavy reinforcements. Over 15 towering trolls. Their massive forms crashed through the landscape as they charged towards the fortress. Hearing their deafening footsteps on the surface above struck fear into the dwarves that still remembered the last time the trolls had attacked. But the Wicked Anvil's trap-filled hallway, a deadly corridor of copper and stone, awaited the goblins. As the trolls surged forward, traps sprang into action, cutting down most of the hulking beasts before they could even reach the inner defenses of our militia squads. The goblins followed, crawling over the trolls' large, lifeless corpses. They were cut down all the same, serrated blades ripping through their crudely crafted armor. But the battle was far from over. The surviving goblins pressed the attack, their battle cries echoing through the long stone hallways. At that moment, the Thunderspear squad and the Hammerbane squad made their move. Charging out into the trap hallway, the dwarves met the goblin forces head-on in a furious melee. Among the fighters was Bimble, a seasoned warrior who fought with the ferocity of an entire squad of dwarves. Yet, in the heat of battle, Bimble was grievously injured and fell to the ground unnoticed by her allies. With the first wave cleared from the nearby hall, the two squads made the decision to retreat back to the safety of the hallway and regroup. They realized their numbers were off. There was a dwarf missing. With the goblin cries growing once more, they rushed back into the fray, finding Bimble in the nick of time and forming a protective line around her. Blow after blow, they held their ground against the advancing goblins, not allowing them to reach the fallen dwarf. After a brutal and exhausting fight, the tide turned in the dwarves' favor. The trap hallway continued to take its toll on the goblin forces, and their numbers dwindled. Panic set in. The remaining goblins fled, retreating from the fortress in defeat. The siege was broken, and the goblins' morale was destroyed. The two squads ran back to the main floors to get the Healing Lord for Bimble. As the goblins fled from the Wicked Anvil in disarray, the retreating ranks were suddenly interrupted by a new terror. Lyces, a towering minotaur. The beast emerged from the wilderness, its eyes wild with rage, and without hesitation it tore through the goblin ranks, slaughtering several of the retreating foes in a violent frenzy. But Lyces wasn't satisfied with goblin prey. The scent of blood leaked from the fortress, the battle-worn dwarves, and their injured comrade Bimble, which drew the beast's attention. With a deafening roar, the Minotaur charged into the trap-filled hallway, ignoring the fallen trolls and the goblins, driven only by desire for dwarven blood. Bimble, still lying injured in the hallway, awaited the Healing Lord's aid, but with the Minotaur now charging towards her, the dwarves had no time to waste. The Thunderspear and Hammerbane squad, weary from battle, once again sprang into action. They rushed back into the hallway, determined to protect their fallen kin. The Minotaur was an imposing force, but the dwarves had no options. With a decisive blow, a hammer dwarf swung with all of his might, smashing Lyces square in the chest with an iron hammer. The beast bled out rapidly before dying, and with the immediate threat neutralized, Bimble was finally taken into safety. The dwarves had saved her. The Wicked Anvil had once again triumphed in the face of overwhelming odds. But the siege and the sudden arrival of the Minotaur served as another grim reminder that in this harsh world, danger was always lurking, and ready to strike when least expected. Hydras, Minotaurs, and Goblin sieges, all of these vile and cruel forces bash against the walls of the Wicked Anvil, and the fortress still stands. The war effort against the Maligning Monster is still ongoing. The dwarves have ventured deeper into the caverns beneath the fortress of the Wicked Anvil, expanding their reach and claiming new territory in the dark, untamed caves. This bold move has come with a heavy price. Dwarven blood has been spilt and the survivors have been left to bury their fallen. Yet, even in the face of such loss, the dwarves pressed on and uncovered something extraordinary within the new section of this cavern. The war efforts have drawn the attention of both the mountain homes and the king himself, and he has joined the Wicked Anvil and its dwarves on the front lines of the war. With newfound hope and support from the king, the dwarves prepare for battle. Early autumn of the year 127, the outpost liaison arrived with 3 wagons full of trade goods. We traded them an array of prepared meals, cut gems, and bone jewelry. And in return, we traded for exotic foods and seeds. We sent the liaison home with a profit of over 10,000 in value. Once the trade caravans left back for the mountain homes, the dwarves decided they were going to claim some new area in the caverns. This area had 2 choke points which could easily be walled off to defend the dwarves. This area would be used for wood production and food production in the future. So, plans started to get made and crews put together to start construction on the walls. Those meetings were interrupted by 4 snatchers, a goblin scouting party looking to snatch up a couple of our dwarven children. With the military on alert, one of them was killed while they all fled. The dwarves of the Wicked Anvil, determined to expand their territory, had opened a new section of the cavern to begin construction on a wall that would claim a vast and untapped area. However, as the crews of the workers began their efforts, disaster struck. From the shadows of the deep, hundreds of Cavedwellers launched a surprise ambush on the dwarves. The first wave of the attack was devastating. More than 10 dwarves fell instantly, overwhelmed by the sheer numbers of the vicious creatures from within the cavern. In response, the Thunder Spear squad rushed into battle, but they too suffered heavy losses. They were not trained enough. 8 members of the squad were cut down in a ferocious assault. The situation was quickly spiraling out of control. It was then that the Anvil Commander Ezum and his Hammerbane squad had arrived. Upon seeing the slain dwarves and the chaotic battle unfolding, Ezum's fury ignited within him. He entered a martial trance, his mind sharpened into a deadly focus, and he tore through the ranks of the Cavedwellers with his steel battle axe. Moving with supernatural speed and precision, Ezum cut through the horde, slaying 25 Cavedwellers single-handedly in a whirlwind of steel and blood. The remaining Cavedwellers, seeing that their numbers were decimated by the unstoppable commander, began to retreat back into the shadows. Only one made it to safety and away from the rampaging dwarves behind him. The day had been won, but the dwarves paid a steep price for their expansion into the dark unknown. The cavern was now theirs, but the memory of the ambush and the fallen comrades would haunt them for the years to come. Sadly, during the fight, one of the heroes of the Wicked Anvil, Nil, the Hydra Slayer, had fallen. Zos, another one of our dwarves, carried him to his final resting place in the tombs. The Wicked Anvil will mourn this hero for a long time, but stories will always be told within the tavern of his great feat of slaying a Hydra. While the corpses of the Cavedwellers rotted just outside of our walls in the caverns, the dwarves built the walls all the way up to the ceiling within the cave. This would offer the utmost protection of our dwarves and allow us to move around safely within this area. A few levels above, the dwarves went ahead and started building some more tombs. There were still 4 to 5 dwarves' bodies that needed to be placed within one of the coffins. This layer would now be the home of any new tombs that we would build in the future. The recent attacks of the Cavedwellers sent one of our dwarves named Reg into a tantrum. Reg was within the temple when she punched Avaz. One punch to the neck was all it took. She opened an artery, killing Avaz on the spot. Our guards grabbed her and she was sentenced to over 81 days in prison. The recent expansion into the caverns allowed us to claim a pillar full of jewels. Within this pillar, we found multiple diamonds which have huge value to add to our fortress. The arrival of King Monum at the Wicked Anvil marked a pivotal moment in the fortress's history. After years of struggle, expansion, and relentless warfare against the Goblins of the Maligning Monster, the king made a bold decision to declare the Wicked Anvil as the new capital of his dwarven kingdom. Its strategic position on the front lines of the war made it the perfect bastion from which to launch the final campaign. Monum, a king with a fierce vision for his future, saw the goblin threat as the greatest danger to his dwarven realm. With his arrival, he brought not only his royal entourage, but also the weight of the kingdom's full military might. His ambition was clear: to vanquish the goblins once and for all, ensuring the safety and the prosperity of his people for generations to come. Under his rule, the Wicked Anvil would become the symbol of dwarven strength and resilience, a fortress not just of stone and steel, but of determination and unity. The dwarves, emboldened by their king's presence, prepared themselves for the inevitable final battles, knowing that victory over the goblins was within their grasp now. Monum's arrival signaled the dawn of a new era, one where the goblins would be crushed and the dwarven kingdom would reign supreme. With the news of the king joining the Wicked Anvil, we had to create a royal throne room, bedroom, and dining hall for the king. With his preferences of kaolinite and iron, we fashioned iron cabinets, coffers, and tables, while kaolinite was his flooring. The king wasted absolutely no time planning the war efforts and ordering the dwarves to smelt over 700 ore to produce the iron and copper and steel that we needed. While construction of a power generator room was being completed, the dwarves opened a hole into the cavern. Once again, a large group of Cavedwellers attacked our dwarves. The Hammerbanes and the Thunderbane squad heard the cries for help and rushed in, slaughtering over 40 Cavedwellers, but we did lose over 19 dwarves. Once again, the Wicked Anvil was mourning their losses. The new tombs were put into use, and the king gave a rallying speech within the tavern. Though these days may be bleak, a brighter future was ahead for the dwarves of the Wicked Anvil. Those brighter days hopefully will be seen soon. With the emergence of the King Monum and the steady leadership of the Anvil Commander Ezum, the dwarves of the Wicked Anvil have two heroes to look up to. Ezum has seen all 10 years of the Wicked Anvil. Since its founding, 10 years have passed. I just wanted to say thank you to the 1,900 of you that have subscribed to my channel. I can't believe that you guys actually tune in to watch this stuff. I do really enjoy making it, and I appreciate that you guys come here to watch it. So with that out of the way, I am a smaller YouTube channel, so any likes, subscribes, comments would help me out a ton. As you guys can see, this is 40 minutes long, or a little over 40 minutes long, and that is hours and hours of footage and even more hours worth of editing. And I'm trying to get better and better at it as I go. I'm kind of self-teaching myself all of these processes and things that I can do to the video to add a little bit of immersion to it. So if you appreciate those, like I said, a like and a comment goes a very long way, and a subscribe, I really do appreciate you guys if you hit that button. Down in the description below, you can find a LinkTree. It's got some merch and stuff. If you do happen to go over there, I don't expect anybody to, but if you do, I really appreciate you. Thank you so much. That is another way of supporting my channel. But you guys just watching this video, it just in general, it helps me out a ton, and it gets me out to a lot of new people. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope you stick around for some future episodes. They should be coming out in the next week or two. And I do appreciate you watching this. So I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.